I'm here in Copenhagen, as you can see. Two familiar sights there, one Little Mermaid and one MEP for the North West, Nick Griffin. Nick, it's Saturday morning and the talks have pretty much collapsed, haven't they? What are your feelings on what's gone on in the last week?
Well, it's been a very interesting experience being here. I've learnt a lot, in particular looking at some of the small print of people behind different lobbying groups and so on, and passing it on to our researchers, and we found a great deal more out about really what is going on with this climate change operation. So the talks have effectively collapsed. The internationalists and the corporations behind this haven't got the green light to go ahead with the largest taxation fraud in world history at the expense of working and tax-paying and poor people on this planet. They're going to go back to the drawing board. They'll be back. Make no mistake about it. What we're up against with this climate change lobby is an immensely powerful scheme. I think, well, it's a certain fact now that well over half the British population do not believe in man-made global warming. So people have almost instinctively got the hang of the fact there's something wrong with what we're being told. I'm not going to go in, certainly now, to why the science is on the side of what they call the deniers, what we call the climate realists, and how the science of people like the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, is not just dodgy, it's bogus, it's fraudulent. That's not really, sort of, in a way, the interesting point. Not for us to do, it's already been done. If you Google, for instance, Lord Monckton and look at Lord Monckton's incredibly effective, very powerful, very informed critiques of the global warming science, then you see all you need to see, and we don't need to go reinventing the wheel in that case. If you look at, say, the Climate Audit website, that's where the scientific debate's going on, which shows that man-made global warming as a theory is literally nothing more than a load of hot air. The idea that the world's most important natural fertiliser, carbon dioxide, is a pollutant which has to be taken out of the atmosphere at enormous expense and turned into worthless rock, it's utter madness. So enough of that. The question that hasn't really been addressed is why this is being done. Now, there's a very good book by Christopher Booker, the British journalist, The Real Global Warming Disaster. Really is worth reading, and he touches on this, and he takes this back to a man called Maurice Strong, who was British-based and heavily involved in the United Nations, an absolutely committed internationalist and a Maoist, as a matter of fact, literally a personal friend of Mao Zedong, the Chinese communist mass murderer. And in the 70s, he and a handful of leftist scientists and pseudoscientists began to think that the idea that the climate was getting colder and that man-made emissions were about to plunge us into a new ice age was a really good way in which to con the public of the world into accepting global government, for the United Nations to go beyond being an expensive talking shop and actually to get the right to rule the planet. After a few years of this, they suddenly found that the climate was actually warming up. So they literally did a flip and started to make the idea it was CO2-induced natural warming, which was about to destroy the planet. That's where it comes from. Now, Booker, I suppose, as a free market, pro-free trade capitalist, doesn't want to go, I think, beyond that. So he's talking, to a degree, about where it comes from an internationalist leftist perspective. Looking more closely and more recently at what the corporations are doing, if you look at the IPCC, you find that this isn't a group, fundamentally, certainly not of independent scientists, and it's not even a group of leftists. It's funded from beginning to end by some of the biggest, greediest corporations on the planet. You've got Shell, BP, you've got Lafarge, which is a hugely polluting French company. You've got DuPont, which has regularly poisoned huge numbers of people and the environment with real poisons such as mercury. You've even got Monsanto in there. These are the people providing the money, providing the drive, even providing the funding for the kind of left-wing cranks that we saw out here fighting with the police during the week. They literally fund these climate change camps as a way of providing pressure from below as well as pressure from below, above in terms of education and so-called scientific documents on world leaders, on the politicians and on the ordinary public to say this really is a problem, or we've got to do something about it, and it's such a big problem that you have to accept global government. I sat and watched in the some of the discussions. I've seen Prodi, who's one of the most important, getting on a bit now, one of the most important socialist politicians of modern European history. 3 times in the last week he said what we really need is to have climate, what do they call it, climate justice. This is the idea that everybody in the on the planet should emit the same amount of carbon, or pay to emit the same amount of carbon. So he was saying 3 times we've got to have a ration, that every person on the planet will have a ration of 2 tons of carbon per year. That's all you'll be allowed to emit. And if you want to do more than that, if you want to, say, fly to Spain for holiday, you've got to buy someone's carbon ration from perhaps someone in Zambia who's not going to use their carbon ration. The only way this could be done would be, if you think about it, a monstrous worldwide spying scheme, because every time you get in your car to go round the corner shop, you've had to record somehow or other that you've used a bit more of your carbon ration. It's a monstrous scheme which would instantly, if imposed, create literally a world government with the power to spy on every single person on this planet. It really is evil, is the only word for it. And although they're not going to get their way quickly, that's where these people are still headed. But right at the back of it, perhaps more than anything else, you've got this idea of carbon credits. And this is pushed by banks, by Goldman Sachs. These are precisely the same people who brought the international economy literally to its knees to destruction with their various scams and schemes. And the greatest scam of the lot is to have the idea that carbon, which is simply a natural fertiliser, is going to become something which the right to emit it can be traded in trades worth literally trillions of dollars per year. And on every single trade, the big banks and the stock exchange boys, the big boys of international finance, would be taking a cut, taking a commission, and able to be speculating. That's really what this is about. If you want to know why anything happens, the old adage is follow the money. And if you follow the money on global warming, you find the biggest, greediest, polluting corporations on the planet, and you find the banks who, having wrecked the real economy, having wrecked their fraudulent finance economy, are now looking for some other way to carry on being super rich. And taxing the people of the world and imposing enormous extra costs on consumers around the world is their idea of a good idea. It's our idea of a bad idea, and I think that being here and giving a voice to the sceptics, to the realists, to the deniers, call us what you will, but giving us a voice here in Copenhagen on news broadcasts all over the world, I hope and believe that I've done my little bit over the last few days to put a spoke in their wheel. But there's going to be more. I'm going to have to write a book about this. I've only given you the briefest insight into the things which our team of researchers have already found. Over the next few weeks and months, we're going to find even more, and we're going to put together a well-documented book about what's going on, which is just going to blow people away.